Last month Rain had arrested a man for stealing bodies from the cemetery. She remembered telling Catherine about it. She hoped that hadn't sparked her interest in this new study. Her parents wouldn't appreciate another daughter playing with the dead. Life. And just what are you going to bring back to life? Catherine waved off her concerns airily. Animals at first, then I think I'll see if I can reanimate people. You know there is an illegal trade in bodies. Rain assumed Catherine remembered the conversation last month, so didn't add any more details. Yes, they wouldn't be able to help me. I've decided that anything I bring back needs to be recently deceased. Body traders would have to kill someone to bring me something fresh enough. No, I'm planning to go to a hospital and talk with people who are dying. Get their permission first. It only seems right if you are going to be mucking around with their bits. Some foresight on her sister's part, and certainly more ethical than other comments from her sister. It seemed the pursuit of science was enough to wipe out many sane objections. Though she didn't want to ask what her 14-year-old sister meant by bits. This plan at least would avoid Rain having to arrest Catherine when she got into trouble with body traders. You couldn't be a normal sister and want to go by ribbons, Rain lamented. You are thinking of Amelia. Amelia was the oldest of all the siblings and was in Europe. She was the epitome of a lady. She had gone to Europe to find a dragon husband. She had heard the stories like the rest of them at father's knee, and it was her dream to make a dragon match. Rain wondered if she would get her dream or find a new one like Lady Ancaster thought and have children. She should have stayed. There is a dragon ready to marry right here, Rain speculated out loud. You mean Victor? He seemed like a good sort. You should marry him. Rain knew they had spoken of the dragon the other night, and Catherine certainly hadn't been surprised by the revelation that a dragon had come a-courting. But Rain hadn't realized that Catherine had met Victor. When did you meet him? She demanded. When he came to speak to Daddy. So why aren't you going to marry him? So much for avoiding pressure from the family. I'm not going to be a slave, Rain answered honestly, hoping to preempt any other attempt to pressure her into a match with the dragon. It isn't really slavery, I mean. Catherine, like their father, had studied dragons and knew about their culture and their law. But Rain wasn't going to be fooled. Owning someone wasn't done amongst sentient beings. Ironically, the Wyvern Empire was the first country in the world to ban slavery. In the New World there was still slavery. What do you call collecting? Rain challenged. Actually, what they are doing is binding themselves at a molecular level in order to transfer matter to this plane. Apparently, they are out of sync enough that they can only be fertile if they have more of a link. They can only make things pop in and out when they have that bond. They call it collecting, but really it is more a scientific phenomenon where our essence is entangled with theirs. Magical almost, if I actually believed in magic. Catherine probably knew more but kindly didn't bore her by going into any details. Rain tilted her head and asked, "Are you really 14? Catherine flashed a grin at the teasing. The last time I counted, I was. Though I think at my next birthday, I'll try being 60. They hopped out at the bookstore. The patrons eyed them suspiciously, as it was not common for a woman to be browsing scientific texts. Catherine, though, was oblivious and skipped through the shelves, muttering to herself the author's name as she searched the shelves. Rain checked out the section on forensics, but there were no new texts, so she went to stand outside so her sister wouldn't see her waiting and rush through her own shopping. Rain was debating whether to purchase some ices when Lady Beechworth sauntered down the street. Afternoon, Miss Ancaster. Any luck with my blackmailer? At least Lady Beechworth was transparent and to the point. There was always the issue of the nobility feeling they could take advantage of their connections with the police. They'd usually sidled up ask and for a small, tiny favor. Of course, saying no made her look like a complete jerk, so at least this was refreshing. No, I have a case. A murder, actually. Lady Beechworth would also appreciate honesty in return. Oh, very gruesome. Someone we know. Her voice a little more eager than was appropriate for a lady of the ton. Rain didn't see any reason not to tease her with some information. It would soon be in the papers. Keeping secrets from the press was impossible. The officers at the yard didn't know the meaning of discretion. The man who killed Victor's bride, Eleanor. The spark of interest was clear in Lady Beechworth's eyes. Anything juicy to tell me? I swear I won't spread it about. Of course, you will. Rain chuckled as she responded to Lady Beechworth's ridiculous statement. The smile grew on Lady Beechworth's lips. Of course, I will. Well, dish. Nothing to dish. Rain wasn't about to tell any of the gossiping ladies of the ton about Eleanor being a high-class thief who had conned a dragon into marrying her. She didn't think Victor would appreciate his shame being aired amongst the very judgmental high society. To deflect Lady Beechworth, she said, I'll visit your blackmailer in the morning. Brilliant. It will ease my mind to have that all sorted. She patted Rain's hand and sauntered off again. Rain wondered if Lady Beechworth learned her manipulation skills from Rain's mother or if it was merely a generational skill. Catherine said from the store doorway, she didn't eat you alive. What is your secret? There isn't anything wrong with Lady Beechworth. She is one of the few who still goes out of her way to talk with me. Catherine shuddered dramatically. She scares the bejeebus out of me. Just talk about your science stuff. She will appreciate that you have a mind. Catherine eyed Rain suspiciously. What did she want to talk to you about? Your investigations. In a manner. Come, let's go for an ice. There was no way she would talk to her sister about the blackmailer. Rain understood the need for silence due to someone's reputation. But she was also aware that her sister was only 14 and didn't need to know all the gruesome details of her work. Besides, Rain had a healthy respect for someone's reputation. Everyone had assumed hers was non-existent because of her physical damage. She knew better than anyone it was impossible to recover a reputation once it was gone. Chapter 11. To give another level of discretion to Lady Beechworth's problem, Rain went before work to the blackmailer's Markham address. He had done well as he lived in a decent part of town. With a park on the corner, the house was nestled in a quaint neighborhood. There was no evidence from the impatience growing in the window that a villainous blackmailer lived there, but Rain trusted Lady Beechworth wasn't sending her on a wild goose chase. That the address matched the one for Markham had been the deciding factor for Rain about the validity of the blackmailing claims. Rain knocked on the door. It swung open with a soft whine. She poked her head into the house. There was a sense to the place that it was empty. That complete stillness that only an abandoned dwelling could have. Even then, Rain hesitated on the threshold. Anyone here? No reply had Rain entering. She searched the rooms for signs of life. The house had sturdy furniture, and though it was clear blackmailing was able to pay the bills, the owner of the house wasn't a collector of possessions. The front room was a male sanctuary with a set of leather seats. Cigar smoke permeated the wood. There wouldn't be any ladies' tea served in that room. She found the blackmailer's body in the parlor. There had been a struggle as chairs had been tipped over and the blackmailer's knuckles were bloody from fighting back. The killer had used a convenient poker from the fireplace to cave in the side of the blackmailer's head and then had discarded poker in a hurry. Rain crouched down by the body. There was a pool of blood by his head. She peeled off her glove and pressed her hand to his neck. The skin was a little warmer than the room. This man had been dead a while, but not days. She picked up a wrist and dropped the hand. Rigor mortis had not set in, so the deadly blow hadn't been too long ago. Her guess would be early hours of the morning or this side of midnight at the very latest. Rain turned away from his body and searched the room. Her first assumption was that an enemy of Markham had confronted him. Possibly one of his blackmail victims. There was no evidence of a search though. Just of the fight. So, the killer either had the incriminating evidence or had panicked and left without it. Rain searched the drawers and shelves. She was looking for hidden compartments in the mantel when she saw something in the fireplace. The grate was clean, ready for a fire to be laid. On the grate was ash and the single curl of a blackened piece of paper. Rain tugged out a handkerchief with her metal hand and laid it out on her knee. She reached with her other hand and delicately placed the burned paper on the handkerchief. She couldn't make out the words on the blackened paper, but she had heard dragons had abilities others didn't. She would see if Victor could help. She found a small glass that she covered the paper with and wrapped the lot with the handkerchief. Keeping it all safe in her mechanical hand, which she locked into position so nothing could jostle free. Traveling across town with her mechanical hand clamped shut was difficult as she kept forgetting and reached for things with her prosthetic only to pull herself up short so she didn't disturb the evidence. Victor answered the door as usual when she knocked. He didn't make assumptions this time and frowned at her on his doorstep. Miss Ancaster. He also had gone back to calling her by her more formal name. At least he kept to his word and her wishes. Are you able to read something off a piece of paper that has been burned? He frowned at her in confusion but answered, yes. She pushed past him into his house. He asked, is this to do with Sebastian? Not everything has to do with you, Dragon. This is a new case. A murder. It wasn't supposed to be. It was supposed to be a simple case of blackmail. At least now she didn't have to worry about aggravating some of the others at work by arresting Markim for blackmail. She might even get some credit from the Peelers if she managed to solve his murder. Yes. So instead of interrogating me, can you help me with this? She offered the glass clamped in her mechanical hand. Of course. He led her through the house to a lab. Rain whistled when she saw it. Is this something all dragons have in their homes? There were tables covered in different machines. Glass tubes in trays and jars of mystery liquids bubbled away. He must have been working in here for things to still be on the go. No. We have our own specialities. I like chemicals. They are simple compared to the other sciences dragons enjoy. Simple. She couldn't fathom a species that considered chemicals a hobby craft. Rain waved her hand at the equipment in the lab. Can we proceed? She offered him the handkerchief with the glass inside. The paper had shed some carbon, turning the handkerchief grey. He pinched the paper with the care of a surgeon and placed it on a glass sheet. He then placed the glass over a tripod stand. Victor spoke as he worked. I didn't expect to see you back here after the way you left. He meant the kiss, and she was pleased he didn't actually say kiss as her cheeks were heating up just thinking of it. She answered honestly, I don't know any other dragons. Victor found that amusing rather than being offended. We aren't all into science. Some of us can be downright moronic. You could have risked going to a dragon who wouldn't have been able to help you at all. Then consider this a compliment then, as I assumed you would be able to help. She watched him as he worked. His hand sure of his craft as he moved. He flashed her a smile. I will. Though I'd rather have you compliment my kissing abilities. So much for him not mentioning the kiss directly. Her cheeks bloomed like a summer rose with heat. Rain instilled some determination into her voice as she stated, you can stop fishing for compliments as that isn't going to happen in this lifetime. She hoped he believed her as she didn't even believe herself, and if he pushed, she just might give in. Is that a challenge? She glared at him and he chuckled as he went back to his work. He set a gas flame under the glass and said, come close as this will be quick. He turned up the flame, so it touched the glass. The words flared to life above the heat. The note read, meet at the maiden's hair. The rest was unreadable. She swore softly under her breath and Victor tutted mockingly, not very ladylike. Hunting killers isn't ladylike. Rain had heard that tune from too many people that her answer was automatic. Her brain was going over the coincidence of 2 murders connected to the maiden's hair. He couldn't be offended by the sharpness of her tone as he answered philosophically, "You should care about what you say, as what we say had to first come from our minds." Rain took out a notebook and wrote down what had been visible on the note. "Don't lecture me, dragon. I have to find out who this blackmailer was blackmailing, as that is who killed Sebastian." Snapping her notebook shut, she spun on her heels and said over her shoulder, "Thank you, Victor. A pleasure." His voice a sensuous purr. Chapter 12. Larkin laid a package on the desk. Rain frowned. "What is this?" "Rosie says every woman needs decent handkerchiefs. I did try to tell her you were a duke's daughter and had plenty." Rain unwrapped the package. The handkerchiefs had her initials embroidered in the corner. Elegant, they were better than the set ordered by her mother from their own seamstress. Rosie had true talent. "Tell her thank you. You can tell her I'll keep an eye on you to make sure you make it home every night." He snorted. As the muscle in their duo, it was him who usually made sure Rain came home. She put away the handkerchiefs. It was a thoughtful gesture. Rain went back to her notes. They were frustrating her. Rain tapped a pencil on a pile of papers. She was supposed to be putting her notes on the case down on those pages, but she was stuck with everything going through her head. Things pointed at the dragon, except that he was too smart to leave too many clues leading to him. He was the only person who would want Sebastian dead. Instead, it was someone that was pointing the evidence towards the dragon on purpose. A smart killer. Which was at odds at the brutal way that Sebastian was killed. The panicked murder and lack of planning in Markham's murder again didn't speak for any intelligence. Passion was more likely the motive in this violent act. Victor might feel honor-bound to kill the person who had killed his wife, but there was more feeling towards her betrayal than to the person who had killed her. The mug of tea plonked onto her desk brought her out of her thoughts. Larkin flopped down in his chair and put his own mug up to his lips before he breathed over the hot liquid. "You are in a loop." It wasn't a question, but she answered, anyway. "Yes. I can't get my head around it all." "Well, talk it out with me. Tell me what you think happened." Larkin leaned back, ready to listen to all the convoluted thoughts in her head. They sometimes did this with difficult cases. As a sounding board, he was trustworthy and always asked questions that untangled her thoughts like a greased chain. "If I had to do that, I'd have to go back to the first crime. The murder of Eleanor." He took a contemplative sip of his tea. Larkin might be the muscle in their partnership, but he was also a very good detective. No, the confidence fraud. They went after the dragon. That takes some guts. I don't think they came up with it themselves. I went to the Maiden's Hair today and spoke to some of Sebastian's old friends. Eleanor and Sebastian weren't known for taking on big fish. They were small-time crooks. They usually pulled their con on businessmen and low-ranking noblemen. Sebastian would work for them and find out what they were like, and then Eleanor would arrive as their dream girl. She would sweep them off their feet and she would drain them of as much as possible. They were cautious and always finished the game long before the businessmen even knew they were being conned. Rain had to admire their skill. They had never overreached. Rain picked up the cup. Larkin was a single man without a housekeeper, so he knew how to make a decent cup of tea. He usually went a little sweeter than she liked. Sugar at least was more pleasant than honey in the subtle cup of tea. "So, you think someone pointed them towards the dragon?" he asked. "Yes. Sebastian didn't work for Victor. The dragon always takes servants in as part of their collection. He would have made sure Sebastian was worth collecting before making him a servant, but when he told me about meeting Eleanor, he said Sebastian was her servant, not his. If Victor didn't know Sebastian, then where did Eleanor get her information in order to play the role Victor wanted?" Someone had to have told the two the information they needed to work the scam. So, a player we haven't met yet. He smiled, amused by the way she thought or by the idea of someone setting up the con men. Or uncovered. The dragon had an enemy 4 years ago who is still around now. They are the one who is tying up loose ends. Rain picked up the pencil and wrote down a question mark above Eleanor and Sebastian's names. She wrote down Victor's name as well with lines between all of them towards him. She then drew an X through the line to Eleanor. I don't think Sebastian killed her. I don't think Victor did either. Sebastian was used to this game and he couldn't play it without Eleanor. It would have been against his own well-being to kill her. It doesn't seem like he found another to play her part either. Instead, he ran off with his tail between his legs. But he also left with enough money to live well in the last 4 years. He was still wearing good clothes and he could afford to travel easily. Okay, let's skip ahead to Sebastian's death then. Do you think he was killed by the other player? I think it was that Pilar. She hated the idea that one of her fellow co-workers was capable. But not only that a famous co-worker, as that would be the only way to be recognized from the papers and out of uniform, but probably her boss as well. The one that met with Sebastian at the hair. She took another sip as she thought. Taking her time, she added, Sebastian was a con man. He escaped justice for that multiple times. Then there is the chance he killed Eleanor and again he escaped justice. Maybe it is a Pilar who just wants justice. So, another player altogether or the same one who had set up the confidence scam. It was a theory that could hold water but still it didn't sit right with her. Without knowing who the police officer was they would not be able to figure out the motive behind the murder or the targeting of Victor for the scam. There was a perfunctory knock on the door and the boy who took around internal mail dropped something on the table. Rain opened the note. It was a new case. A burglary on one of the more affluent streets. The people thought because she was from society that people would talk to her. Unfortunately, society never spoke to Pilas regardless of their parentage. Gathering her baton and tugging on her coat, she flicked her head to indicate they had to leave. Rain rubbed her ear, but the ringing wouldn't stop. She had forgotten how high-pitched a hysterical woman could be. Even when they discovered the jewelry was borrowed rather than stolen, the pitch had gone to new octaves. Larkin asked, "What?" She flashed a smile. He must be hearing a ringing in his own ears. Before she answered, her eyes caught on a sign hanging above the door ahead of them. It was for the Times. One of her father's favorite newspapers, as there was a journalist there that managed to get stories weeks before others. Instead of admitting that she hadn't said anything at all, she pointed to the newspaper and said, "I just need to stop in there." Aware of her penchant for collecting papers for her father, he asked, "Haven't you done your paper shopping for the week? I want to see something." It won't take long, and we didn't spend so much time on this case as we would have. They'd spent less than an hour dealing with the squealing mistress who had her jewelry borrowed by her teenage daughter. Larkin gave in with a grunt and veered towards the entrance to the newspaper. They were assaulted with noise as they entered the room. Large metal machines hissed and clunked as they rolled sheets of rag paper. The machine dominated the room. Recoiling back when a man popped up from behind the press, Rain covered her surprise quickly. He motioned for them to follow him. They made their way around the machine and the heat of the boiler. Once in the other room, Larkin closed the door. Though it didn't get rid of all the sound, it made it bearable. After the screeching of the mistress and the machine, she missed the man's first words. Rain shook her head to gather herself and said, "Sorry. I'm Rain and this is Larkin. We were hoping you stored your plates." The man offered a hand. "Thomas Barnes. I'm the editor here." It also appeared he was everything at the newspaper, as they were as yet to see anyone else at the press. He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "We never throw anything away. A plate is expensive to make. Any idea what you're looking for?" She shifted sideways as she made her way past moving machinery and followed the newspaper man farther into the building. "We're looking for images of peelers," Thomas hummed speculatively. "That will be a few years ago. I find you fellas boring, so I avoid stories to do with you." "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Rain asked with a bit of a smile. Thomas blinked as if he hadn't realized he had insulted them. He recovered and flashed a grin. "Take it as a compliment. I only like to chase scandals." He ran a hand through hair that was in need of a cut. He must have remembered why they were there as he jerked into motion. "We keep the plates back here. Sometimes we can reuse the more generic ones. Thought about putting out some of those penny sheets, but we struggle to keep up with the demand for the paper. Yours is my father's favorite." Rain collected papers for her father, who used them to analyze what was happening around the world. He could speculate on the smallest amount of information and be accurate enough that the government often used his services to make large trade deals and decisions. Thomas skipped backwards, so he could turn his body to look at her but still continue towards their goal. "Really? Not your own?" Surprised that he would assume a woman would be reading the newspapers. Well, at least his newspaper. There were society papers that most of the ton read avidly every week. The Times was a different sort of paper and instead covered more than just what happened in Londinium.